We're here today to talk about earthquake safety, the 7 steps to earthquake safety. What we say that by following these, you'll be prepared to survive and recover. My name is Mark Benthian. I am the Executive Director of the Earthquake Country Alliance, which is based at the Southern California Earthquake Center, which is headquartered at the University of Southern California. We have universities and scientists across the state, around the country, and even in other countries working together to understand earthquakes in California. And while we've been the Southern California Earthquake Center since 1991, and I've been with the organization since 1996. As of this summer, we're going to be transitioning to the same acronym, SCEC, but will now be Statewide California Earthquake Center. So really what we've been operating and doing many things statewide for many years, especially some of the activities that I lead as part of our education and outreach program. And one of the key things that we do is talk about earthquakes both around the world and how they affect us here in California, and then what to do about them to be prepared to survive and recover. So let's get into it. We're going to have a little bit of science and then a lot of safety. Earthquakes happen around the world and in many different places, but you can see there is a pattern. And you may know that the Earth's crust is divided into plates. If you think of the crust or the Earth like an egg or an apple, the crust is like the thin shell or skin of the apple, shell of the egg, skin of the apple, and the plates are breaking up that crust. And along their boundaries, they're rubbing past each other, diving beneath each other, or crashing into each other. And you then have earthquakes, and in some places volcanoes, where the plates are diving beneath each other. The plate is melting and then coming up. And that's why you know about the Ring of Fire example around the Pacific Ocean. If we look at the plates in this format, you'll see that we're on the boundary here in California where we've circled between the Pacific Plate and the North American Plate. The Pacific Plate as a whole is trying to move to the northwest compared to the North American Plate. So it's moving towards and going beneath Alaska, beneath Japan, and in many different ways spreading apart down here, so that this plate then is being pushed underneath South America. And when the plate boundary comes on shore, that's mostly in California, the San Andreas Fault. And our understanding of our faults in California has greatly improved since the 80s. We've been doing a lot of work to understand where the faults are, but also, according to these images, what type of earthquakes can happen on these faults and how frequently. So an actual forecast of the rupture on the faults and the likelihood of that rupture. The San Andreas is the long red band throughout the state, and all the others that you see here are different faults that either are vertical, where they look like a thin line, or at an angle in the earth where you can actually see kind of the top and the bottom, and it looks like a big square. But as you can see, it's very three-dimensional and fits together. So we talk about the entire fault system of California. It's not just the one fault along the plate boundary, but all of these are making that boundary up. And when we put that all together, we can have a forecast of earthquakes throughout the state and the likelihood of these faults having an earthquake. As more people have now joined, I'll just say again, I don't see you and I don't hear you. And also I see there's no need to fill in the S numbers Sally has put in there. But you can put questions into the Q&A session or section of your menu bar. That's the best place. So I'll definitely see it because there's a lot of chatting going on. And again, you don't need to put your name or your S number into the chat. We have other records that you're with us here. And Sally has just said to follow the LMS instructions after you attend, in case you're not seeing that in the chat. Okay, so keep an eye on that too. So what we've done is this forecast is look at where the earthquakes have happened in the past and many other factors to determine that the southern San Andreas fault, which is I'll show is this portion down here, number one, basically from near the Salton Sea through central California. This hasn't had an earthquake on its southern part since 1700. On the northern part, it was in 1857. And of course, up in San Francisco, it was in 1906. We expect a large earthquake on the southern part here, number one. However, number two is the HayWired Rogers Creek fault in the San Francisco East Bay. Number three, the San Jacinto fault. And so you can see many of the larger faults in California have the larger chance of having an earthquake. All right. That southern San Andreas fault, if it were to have a large earthquake, it was studied that in 2008, there was a big study of what that earthquake would be like. And I'll just mention one more time, I guess, just to keep the chat a little bit clear, you do not need to put your numbers in there and your names. So let's just be using it for chatting, asking questions, talking about the presentation. Also, this earthquake here would rupture for 180 miles along. This particular scenario was designed with the earthquake starting at the southern end and rupturing to the north, though it could have been the other way around. It also could have started in the middle and split and gone both ways, as what happened in the 1906 earthquake near San Francisco. It would take 100 seconds to rupture the whole way. And as a result, there would be shaking for over 2 minutes in many places, not just right along the fault and not just at the epicenter, but you can see when a very large earthquake, the epicenter is just where it starts. It actually ruptures and has earthquake shaking being generated all along the fault and into some areas more intense because of the type of soil that's in that area, like in the LA basin, where it's very thick sediments that have eroded off the mountains and filled in what was once offshore, made that very flat area great for agriculture and great for houses, but does amplify shaking. So not as ideal when you factor in earthquakes. And if you compare that to the 1994 Northridge earthquake, a magnitude 6.7, it's about 56 times larger overall in terms of the shaking and in the intensity of energy released. And if you kind of compare that, you can almost see if you take that energy, that red area from the Northridge earthquake, mostly in the San Fernando Valley, and kind of copy that 50 times, you can almost see that. But the big difference is not just the area of strong shaking, but again, the duration, up to 2 minutes. On the Northridge earthquake, shaking was really just 20 seconds or so of the earthquake shaking itself. And as a result, this was what the scientists and engineers and others determined could happen in such an earthquake. You might have 300,000 buildings significantly damaged. This means more than 10% of their value. So $1 million building having $100,000 in damage, that's considered significant, as it would be costly and may not even be covered by insurance. If you have a 15% deductible, there would be widespread infrastructure damage to the railways and utilities, and possibly to roads and freeways. We know that after the Northridge earthquake, that many of the freeways were repaired by Caltrans and retrofitted. So we hope that there would be less bridge collapse as what we've seen in the past. There could be 1,600 large fires that require a fire engine to respond. And yet there are not that many fire engines in the region, so that some of those fires would go unchecked. We don't know when this earthquake happened, just looking at the question in the Q&A, but it really can happen any day. And there are many other faults in the region that can have a large earthquake any day too. So we really do need to be taking action and considering that that what you do today may make a difference if the earthquake happens tomorrow. So even taking action right away, some degree of action, and we'll get into what those actions might be. Note that there will be a lot of economic loss, building damage, but also loss to business that won't be able to operate. Many people who will be not able to stay in their homes for some period of time. Many people, 50,000 injuries require going to the hospital for care, and perhaps 1,800 deaths, could be less, could be more, depending on the actual buildings and issues that happen in the earthquake. This is just from the scenario. In the Bay Area, there's also been a big study on the likelihood of a earthquake on the HayWired fault and what would happen as a result. And this really focused, as it was done more recently, a lot on our dependence on the internet, all our interdependencies on lifelines, on utilities, on the roads, on the bridges. And there was an earthquake on this fault in 1868, but of course there was far few people, far few buildings, and far few infrastructure. And if you search for USGS HayWired, you can read all about this study. And similar to what I showed for the ShakeOut earthquake in Southern California, the HayWired scenario talks about 100,000 buildings significantly damaged. This is a smaller earthquake. You would still have widespread infrastructure damage, still many fires, lots of damage economically. There was a study that this included on people who would be trapped in elevators throughout the Bay Area, and 22,000 people. And imagine that the firefighters who might normally go and be involved with rescuing those people are going to be putting out fires, so they may be there for quite some time until the power is turned back on. Still many injuries and too many deaths. So why do we need to prepare? For all of those reasons that things are going to be different after these earthquakes. You're not going to be able to have communications, or it's going to be very limited. Power, utilities, water, gas, all these things may not be working the way that, and it may be days for power to be resumed, maybe longer. Water may take weeks in some places, as full water mains need to be rebuilt across the region, maybe even longer in some places. Roads may not be the way that you normally expect them to be. You may need to be rerouted. If people who rely on transportation, public transportation or paratransportation, that may not be available. And stores and pharmacies and banks, many other places will be closed, either because of their damage or until they clean up. They may also not have power or water or the things they need to operate for some period of time, and getting information is going to be really difficult. I will be talking about earthquake insurance. I see a question that in the chat. And then there's a question about the Ferndale earthquake in Northern California in December. I'm not going to really say much about that today. Though, that's an area that can have that earthquakes, and have had earthquakes very similar to that many times in the past, and can have a very large earthquake offshore. So across the state, there are, I've talked about two major faults and two scenarios for what might happen. Those types of scenarios can happen on faults that are all across the state, no matter where we are. We really need to be taking action at every level, certainly before, being safe during, and being ready to respond afterwards. And it's really all of us working together in our homes, among our neighbors, our broader community, and beyond. So we've created the 7 steps to earthquake safety. That's what I'll be focusing on. You can find all the details, far more details really than I'll be speaking here, on the website at earthquakecountry.org/7 steps, and in Spanish at terremotos.org/siete pasos. As you can see, we have the steps that are before, during, and after, and I'll get right into these now. We do have materials about these topics and each step, and the 7 steps overall, as well as guidance for how to be safe in different situations, guidance for people with disabilities in 16 languages at earthquakecountry.org/languages. So you can share the materials there with others you know. We start with step 1, secure your space. This is really the most critical thing to do for earthquakes preparedness. Of course, before the earthquake happens. You want to identify things that are within your home or workplace or elsewhere that you spend a lot of time that could fall or be thrown. And the thing is, anything in your space that you stay in can be thrown or fall over if it's not fastened in place. So we can secure these objects, and it will definitely reduce injuries and damages. These are the cause of most of the injuries in earthquakes, either the items falling over or things with glass falling, and there being glass all over the floor, people walking through that. And it's actually really simple to do. So with tall furniture, you want to use flexible nylon straps that are available at home improvement stores and online. There's 2 main companies, one QuakeHold or Ready America is one, the other is called Safety Proof. They have very similar products. One uses kind of a Velcro that you can remove after you've installed it temporarily if you need to get behind the bookshelf or whatever it is. The other uses a kind of a latch. So, but both have an end that gets bolted into the studs in the wall, and the other end sticks to the top of your, or the side of your item, and that really does keep that from falling over. Televisions are really key to secure. You can either secure it, as we see here in these diagrams, to the stand that they sit on, whether it's a large TV or like a computer monitor, or you can mount them to the wall, which actually can be the best option, as it's really securely mounted there. But securing these objects, as they're so vulnerable to be knocked over anyways, they're so light and thin and wide, is really important to do, not just even for earthquakes. So for smaller items, there's also options that you can use. There's different types of putty and gel that will hold small objects to their counter or shelf or wherever they may be, and prevent them from becoming projectiles. Also, your kitchen cabinets, you may have baby proofed or child proofed your lower cabinets. You can earthquake proof your upper cabinets with a variety of different types of latches. Some you just push and it pops open. Some you lift up as shown here on the right, you kind of lift, you reach in and you lift up a clip. Some have clips that fall down in place during the shaking and prevent the cabinet from opening up. And I'll say once again, if you could put your questions in the Q&A, that way if there's more chats, I won't miss them. There's a question in the chat though about, does earthquake putty damage furniture like cabinets? No, actually it's really designed to not leave any residue. You put it on there, you twist it down to kind of push it on, and then you're going to want to twist to remove. You can't just pull it. It requires that twisting motion, and that putty is designed to not leave any residue. Your water heaters and large appliances are also important to have secured correctly. Your water heater should have 2 steel bands that wrap around it that are then connected into the wall behind it. And there's or kind of commercial ways, commercial kits you can buy for that. You can have plumbers, usually can be the ones that might install those for you, but you can do it yourself too. You can secure your refrigerator so it won't fall forward and spill out its contents as well. And it's important to make sure gas appliances are connected to the wall, to the gas valve with the flexible stainless steel gas connector, so if they do move, it doesn't break that line. And so the summary of this step is, get started. And one thing that you can do right now, even while we're following this presentation, is look around and see if there's something that's heavy near you, that above you somewhere, that if, or maybe above where someone else might be, that if the earthquake were to fall, it would knock that thing over for sure, and it could come down onto you and hurt you. So move it lower, put it someplace that won't fall. So that's just a very free thing you can do and really be thinking about. And certainly if there is an earthquake, go ahead and if something hasn't fallen already, do that, as because there will be aftershocks, and those items at that point would then fall. But really do it before. The earthquake could happen tonight, and having done that may have saved you from that injury. Then make a list of the things that you need to secure and do them over time. If you don't have the right tools, like a drill for drilling the bolts into the walls, you can ask someone to borrow that. If you have one and someone else doesn't, help them do that work too. You can give these kits for securing objects as birthday presents. And it sounds silly, but it really is important and very thoughtful to be taking care of people that you care about. Okay, yes, the presentation's going to be shared by Caltrans, including the recording of the presentation. And there's a question also in the chat if there have been small quakes in SoCal the last few days, largest being 1.07. That's extremely small, barely felt by anyone. What's the possibility of a larger quake to occur? Well, not because of those quakes, but there's always the possibility of that large quake occurring. When we get larger quakes like 4s or 5s, generally you start to look at, there's about a 5% chance of those being a foreshock to a larger quake that then follows. We did see that back in an even larger earthquake in 2019 in the Ridgecrest area. On July 4th, there was a 6.4 earthquake, followed the next day by a 7.1. So that can happen for sure at any time. But really the chance of having large quakes in most of California is possible any day. Not a high, not like 60% chance or not even 20% chance on a single day, but it really can happen. Okay, so in step 2, we're talking about all the planning you do and preparation you do for when the disaster, when the earthquake happens. So creating your plan, and in particular, how you're going to communicate. And one thing that is important to know is what you're planning for. And there is a website called myhazards.caloes.ca.gov. You can just Google My Hazards, you'll find it. You can type your address in and it will show you your location and the nearby faults, liquefaction areas, landslide areas, and even if you're right near the shore, potential for tsunami. And so that can be helpful for just understanding the likelihood of these issues near you, and then you can take appropriate action. You also want to understand how to turn off your utilities if needed. You don't turn these off automatically. For example, you don't turn off your gas automatically unless it has a gas shutoff valve, automatic gas shutoff valve that is triggered by the earthquake. But afterwards, if you don't have any gas leak, don't turn off the gas. If you haven't smelt the gas or hear it hissing, because you'll have to wait for the utility company to come and turn that back on for you, just in case there indeed was a leak. So learn about these. Also have a fire extinguisher and know how to use it. This is so important. If you remember back, I mentioned how many fires get started. They often, almost always, get started from some small fire at the beginning. And if possibly you can put that out, that small fire that happens because maybe a lamp has fallen over and broken and started a fire. There's some sort of you were cooking and the stove was on and somehow gas, the fire started. Being able to put out that small fire before it spreads throughout your home and then spreads to your neighbor's home, and so on and so on. Very important. Ask your neighbors, do they have fire extinguishers so they can put their house fire out, their small fire within their house out before it spreads too. That protects your home. So give them one if need be. Again, we're not saying to use the fire extinguisher to put out your whole house that's on fire, but to put out that small fire first. So also important is to take the various type of training or networking activities that are available through often through your city fire department, police department, or emergency management agency, such as the community emergency response team trainings, programs like Map Your Neighborhood or NeighborFest. FEMA has a great program called You Are the Help Until Help Arrives. It's online for simple ways of providing care to people. And also, of course, the Red Cross has many programs. So really encourage you to, if you haven't taken any of these, to do so. And then you want to plan how you're going to communicate, having a meeting place where everyone can go if your home is not accessible. And maybe even also among your coworkers, having a plan for that. Having a list of key contacts that you share with those that you want to be able to communicate with. That can include someone who's in another area, like even another state, that everybody will report into, as the local phone lines may not be available for some time. Your cell phone is likely not going to be available. You may be able to text longer than you'll be able to make a phone call, but at some point the system will be overwhelmed. At some point, some cell towers will lose their backup battery power and stop functioning too. Learn about your children's emergency plans for their school. If you are or know someone with has a disability, develop your support network or know that network. You can get alerts from various agencies, from the city, from county, for your cell phone, and including, and I'll talk a bit more about this, an earthquake early warning app on your phone, and have that, such as the MyShake app. Now we'll talk about disaster supplies, step 3. And you may have heard about, having a go bag. You want to have the things that are most important to you that you need to, if you're on your own. And we have a disaster supplies checklist that you can use to kind of organize your supplies. If you go to earthquakecountry.org/step3, you can find this and download this. We talk about different types of supply bags or supply kits or boxes, however you want to organize them, in different places. I'm just going to really touch on 2 of these. One, the under bed bag. This is maybe not something you've heard about before. This is really designed to prevent your feet from being cut up by broken glass, as well as being able to find your way out of your room, make your way out of your room. So it's not your go bag that you take with you when you leave. This is basically putting shoes and socks and a flashlight and an extra pair of glasses if you need those to see, perhaps even like a crowbar in case the door of your bedroom has been jammed and you can't get out. So this is a bag that's really meant that if the earthquake happens at night or other time where you don't have your shoes on, but especially where you wouldn't be able to see where your shoes are, maybe during the earthquake, your bed has moved around, wherever your shoes are, they're now under your bed. Can't find your glasses that you might normally have put on the nightstand. They've flown off somewhere. So if you put all these objects into a bag that has like a drawstring or even a backpack or just a plastic grocery bag that you tie up with all these items, and then tie that or put that and connect it somehow to your bed so that you know that you can reach down to find that bag and open it up and put your socks and shoes on, have that flashlight, those glasses, everything, without there being glass in your shoes, because they were protected within the bag. And so they weren't just sitting out for glass to get in them on the floor. And when you first step off to the floor, you're not walking on the broken glass. So it's such a common injury in earthquakes that this is a really smart way of preventing that. But you also want to have a go bag, or maybe keep this in your car, of items that if you do need to leave your home, because of serious damage, or because of power outage that you really can't stay there on your own, that you have medical perhaps needs for power, that you want to have a bag that you have, make sure you have the important things that you're going to definitely need to survive: your medications, water, some food, first aid kit, your personal health and hygiene needs, and perhaps if you have pets, some supplies for that. For your home supplies, I'm not going to say a lot about these, but you really want to have things that you may need. You may stay in your home for 2 weeks without your utilities. So what are you going to need to be able to eat and survive and have those? And you may organize them in a way that you could take them with you too, if you need be. For water, you want to have at least a gallon of water stored per person or pet per day for up to 2 weeks, which could mean for 3 people in a pet, up to like 54 gallons of water, ideally in your home. Now, 14 days is because the water could be out that long. There are big water gallons like shown here that have 55-gallon storage, and I have one of these. They can last for 5 years. To put a little chemical in that water may not be the best tasting water afterwards, but it will be drinkable. And this isn't just water for drinking, it's also for cleaning and other uses. Also check with your workplace. What does your employer provide, and what additional personal supplies will you need? Then we look at minimizing financial hardship. This is a lot to do with your property and how it will fare during the earthquake. What type of work can you do to strengthen it through retrofitting if it's an older home, kind of older than the 1980s, or more likely to have issues that could be retrofitted than newer homes built to more modern building codes. You might consider earthquake insurance, but the simplest thing you can do is organize important documents, have an emergency first aid plan, where it's having a small amount of cash. It might be you keep in your go bag 1s and 5s, so that you're not having to buy a single bottle of water for $20, because you only have 20s. You may not be able to go most likely to the bank or ATM for quite some time. So having that available for your immediate needs. Having an emergency savings account is always a good idea, to put a little bit in that, as you can, build that up over time. Having copies of your important documents, and like your insurance information that you're going to need to. You can organize that on paper, in the cloud, on a USB stick, all these different ways that you can have that information. Just keep it as secure as you can. There are different options for retrofitting some older buildings now, including the earthquake brace and bolt for homes that have crawl spaces, older homes that typically have that type of perimeter concrete wall that the house is built up on, not a slab. And there's ways that those can be retrofitted, and other options too that you can find at strengthenmyhouse.com. These are both websites through the state and the California Earthquake Authority. And note that infrastructure I mentioned earlier, of course, the freeway bridges having been retrofitted, and utilities have really been doing a lot to retrofit their structures and their pipelines, but we know that more can still be done, and there will be losses and some degree of shut off of those utilities for some time. You can choose your earthquake insurance. It's not included in your homeowner's insurance. It's also available for renters and condo owners, and there's different options, and you can even customize your policy. You're on your own. You can go to earthquakeauthority.com and play with their calculator to determine what really the coverage that is best suited for your needs. During an earthquake, we want to protect ourselves from the shaking, and there are some real key instructions that hopefully you've heard of, as well as long-term messaging that should never have been said, such as get in a doorway, should never have been advice. It does not protect you in an actual strong damaging earthquake from the things that will be falling or flying across the room. Doesn't protect you from the building falling down. There's no force field around that door that's going to protect all the objects that would be coming down from coming into you there. And you just really can't hold yourself up in the strong shaking. You may have gotten in a doorway in the past and been okay, but was that really a strong, super strong earthquake that we can have that would be knocking you down? And of course, if there's many people in a room and one door, it doesn't do anything. So our guidance is what we call, for most people, to drop, cover, and hold on. And as shown in this picture, getting down under tables, desks, etc., will protect us from things that are falling. And really, even when we look at earthquakes like the Northridge earthquake, you might have some buildings that have collapsed partly, even fewer that collapse completely, but tens of thousands of buildings that kind of look more like this, where homes and buildings where things have fallen and can cause injury. And again, either from the objects themselves, the glass that might have broken because of them. So this is really so key about not running outside as things fall off buildings long before the buildings themselves might fall down. So people get hit and either injured or worse when they run outside. So we want you to drop where you are onto your hands and knees, not try to run down the hall and get somewhere. You want to cover your head and neck right away as possible, maybe just with one arm. You want to look around. If there is a sturdy table or desk that's nearby, you can crawl underneath it for shelter. If not, you can crawl up against a wall or next to low furniture for kind of sideways protection. The whole goal here is make yourself a smaller target so that things aren't coming at you, or if they do, they're kind of coming from one direction only. So you're limiting what might actually come and injure you. And then hold on to your shelter until the shaking stops. If you have gone underneath, or use both hands and arms to cover your head and neck as best you can. Again, I'll mention in the chat, maybe people have just joined, you do not need to put your S number in the chat. And that will kind of keep it clear so I can make sure I'm seeing any comments there. And please do put your questions in the Q&A. I will come and answer those that are there. If you're not able to get down and back up again on your own, don't get down or don't get as low. Maybe sit on a chair, sit on a couch or a bed. Just get yourself again low as possible and as small a target as possible. We do have guidance for what to do for people with disabilities on our website at earthquakecountry.org/accessibility. And as you can see, we encourage people who use a wheelchair or walker that has wheels to lock the wheel and cover and hold on. Lock it, cover, and hold on. That kind of shows that here. And we do have some images and videos and clips of these videos showing what to do. So this is what to do if there is a table or if there's not a table. And you can find these on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/greatshakeout. You can download them too at shakeout.org/messaging if you want to share them with others. This is what to do if you have a cane. You're going to bring that cane with you down so you can use your cane to get back up again. This again, if you're able to. If not, take a seat somewhere. Don't get down. This is locking, covering, and holding on if you use a wheelchair. And similarly, someone who uses a walker, the type that kind of a rollator type, where she could actually sit on the seat of the walker itself, as well as in a chair next to that, as she's done. And covering her head as much as she's able to is the key. So do something. If you can't get your hands all the way up over your head and your arms, cover yourself as best as you can. I see a comment about no sound. I'm pretty sure we have sound, as people would be saying so. So it may be your system. Sorry about that. Oh, maybe no sound to the video. Yeah, there's no sound in these clips. Though the videos themselves do have audio. The full video do. So when should you protect yourself? Of course, when you feel earthquake shaking, you want to immediately drop, cover, hold on, or lock, cover, hold on. Or we do have other guidance, such as I should have said here, if you are in bed, turn over, cover your head with a pillow, stay in bed, don't get up and out of bed, don't get on the floor next to the bed. Again, all the reasons because of the broken glass. We do clip out of the video that she does have her under bed bag where her shoes are, where she found those shoes without glass in them, was able to put them on and keep moving. You should also protect yourself when you get an earthquake warning, which I'm about to talk about. And then also when you do an earthquake drill like ShakeOut each October, or any day when you want to practice for an earthquake. But many people across the state, millions, will be participating in this year's great California ShakeOut, always on the third Thursday of October, the main day, and that's October 19th. Well, let's talk about earthquake early warning. So what is now possible and exists throughout the state is the system where all the sensors we have can detect an earthquake happening near where it begins, start to determine what magnitude earthquake that is, and send the signal ahead to an earthquake alert center, which pulls together and figures out, calculates where the shaking is going to be intense, and starts to send warnings to people in those areas. It's kind of like a lumberjack who, cutting down a tree, yells timber to warn people that the tree is falling. And they generally will yell that kind of towards the direction where the trees that have fallen, not the other way around. So you want to get the signal, get the warning if it's going to potentially be some strong shaking. You don't want to get it if it's not going to shake you strongly. And so the system is set up to do that. And there's different ways you can get the warning. Most people will get it through, for larger earthquakes, magnitude 5 or greater, as a wireless emergency alert automatically through your phone, kind of like an Amber Alert. You'll hear the sound of that alert notice, and you'll have text on your screen to read what it was about. It might say something like, it shows here, earthquake, earthquake, expect shaking, drop, cover, and hold on. Protect yourself now. You'll just be able to read that on your phone. So you have to have the phone in your hand to kind of look at what it's going to tell you. You also can download the MyShake app. And this is from Berkeley, University of California, Berkeley. This will give you warnings of earthquakes from magnitude 4.5 or greater, and where the intensity at your location is a lower level than in the other option. And this also will have an audio recording, so you'll hear that message, even if you're not holding your phone. If it's across the room, you'll hear earthquake, earthquake, expect shaking, drop, cover, hold on, protect yourself now. Some Android phones, this on the right, also have a now built-in system for giving you that warning. So you could get all three of these warnings if you have all three on kind of set up. But you really encourage you to have one of these. The MyShake app also has other information that you'll be able to get after the earthquake, tells you where it was and some details. It's also kind of guidance on the 7 steps to earthquake safety is in that app. And make sure that you do have that app or some of the others that are available. You can go to earthquake.ca.gov to learn more. There are other earthquake apps that are designed just to tell you where the earthquake was, give you a signal a few minutes after the earthquake. Those are not the same. You want to have the earthquake early warning app. Now, sometimes it's possible that you may be so close to the origin of the earthquake, to the epicenter, that the warning won't get to you in time. So there is a kind of a zone where you're far enough away to get the warning in time, but not far enough away where the shaking will be diminished and won't matter to have gotten the warning. So there's kind of a zone, like a donut around an earthquake epicenter for its use. But the potential for some earthquake sources, you might get 20 to 30 seconds of notice. And also what's being implemented through this system is automated capabilities, such as trains coming to a stop, elevators coming to a floor, and garage doors of fire stations opening so that those doors don't get jammed, so that the fire engine can roll out. These are really important, and can, even if the earthquake warning arrives afterwards, can still be put automated things into place within a few seconds. And so it's really important that we get more of those systems installed across the state too. I see a comment in the chat about people who've gotten the signal after the earthquakes, but someone mentioned that while it was after the shaking, the phone started going off, and that allowed them to find their phone in the dark. That's an interesting use of that system. Okay, so I mentioned the ShakeOut. I won't say much more here, but yeah, you can go and find out a lot more at shakeout.org. And it is going to be this Thursday, October 19th, third Thursday of October. After the earthquake, it's still a danger period. You might need to evacuate. You might need to help injured or prevent further injuries or damage. And you're going to be ready for aftershocks and to protect yourself again. Why you might need to evacuate, of course, there may be significant building damage, real big cracks in the walls, obvious damage that you don't feel safe. If you see thin cracks and if it's really not that much damage, you may be better off staying in your home than having to relocate somewhere. If you have all the supplies you've organized, then you'll be ready for that. Obviously, if there's a fire happening that you can't put out or other hazard, you want to leave. Take your go bag and quickly evacuate. If you're near the shore, near the coastline, very close to the coast in most places along the state, there's a potential that the earthquake that you're feeling may have been off the coast in an offshore fault, and it may have generated a tsunami, and those waves will arrive very quickly. And for most of the state, we're not talking about huge tsunami waves, but right along the coast that can have strong currents, and it can have it's basically rapid flooding, like a storm surge coming in. It's not a big wave, big cresting wave like you see in movies and in your imagination. It really is just like all of a sudden the sea level is rising super quickly and pushing in, and it has a big force behind it, the way that the water is moving. It's very different from normal waves. In northernmost California, there's a large fault offshore, the Cascadia Fault, Cascadia Subduction Zone, that can create much larger tsunami waves. We also can have tsunamis that are from other parts of the world. And for those, there will be several hours of warning time, and you'll get official alerts, giving you time to evacuate. But if you feel shaking and you're near the coast, you want to, as soon as you're able to, move during the shaking. As soon as the shaking dissipates to where you can move, you want to start to get to inland. Drop, cover, hold on first, but then get to high ground or move inland. And then afterwards, we call the step after the aftershocks have really subsided, or just after you have to kind of move out of your home, or you're moving on. How do we restore our daily life? How do we reconnect with people? Starting to use your insurance if you have it, or look at other options for repairing damage and rebuilding our communities. So we're checking for the ongoing issues, checking on people, using refrigerated and frozen foods first. If the power is going to be out for a long time, contacting your insurance agency, updating your out of area contact, like I mentioned earlier, having everybody can call in, starting your repairs. If you can't stay in your home, there are guidelines for what can even be brought to shelter. So don't try to bring a whole lot. Really bring only what you need, and your medications, your personal needs. You can't really take a lot there, but shelter may not be your only option too. Of course, you may have someone friends, family can go live with, may be able to even stay in a motel or hotel as needed. Your insurance may even cover some of that costs. And just to complete the presentation, show the website again, and where you can email us for additional questions, info@earthquakecountry.org. Now I want to turn, at the time we have left, to questions here. I'm going to start with the questions in the Q&A, and feel free to add more there. So Denise asked earlier on, do faults shift with global warming and climate change? Not really. The climate, once you get down about 3 to 5 feet down in the earth, climate is doesn't really affect anything. It's pretty much consistent year round. You can have more water coming into areas, into the ground, aquifers, and increase the water, or raise the water table, which can increase the potential for liquefaction. You can kind of weigh down the earth, and because of that water that either having been drawn out with water pumping out, or now kind of water coming into our aquifers, and that can kind of shift things a little bit. It might lead to a fault moving earlier or later than it would have otherwise. But it's really more the effects of climate change when you have the disaster can exacerbate the disaster. And Patrick asked, what factors determine the probability? Going back to the map I showed of the probability of earthquakes. Part of it is the history of earthquakes. We've been able to look and by digging down a trench 20 feet or so, we can look at the layers in the walls of that trench to see the past history of earthquakes, maybe going back several thousand years. So it's partly as kind of, if it's had an earthquake every 150 or every 300 or every 1,000 years, we kind of have that information. We have information from how the plates are shifting around using GPS to track the motion of different parts of the region. Lots of different technology goes into our understanding of the likelihood of those earthquakes having ruptures. Another question, Brian asks, what should we do if an earthquake happens while driving in a vehicle? Great question from a Caltrans group. You basically want to slow down. If you once you notice that the earthquake is happening, you know that because of the car suspension, you may not feel it as much as you might start seeing things around you shaking, or people reacting to it, other drivers. You want to slow down. You want to pull over as you can and stop. And you want to not be under or on a bridge or overpass as much as you can. And basically wait for, set your parking brake and wait for the shaking to stop. Be mindful of the drivers around you, though. They may not be doing the same thing. There's a question about that the news reported a hole in the ocean floor near Oregon leaking from the plates. Does this increase the chance of earthquake triggering on all of the faults or just one fault? I'm not aware of that story. It likely doesn't change much. Again, if anything, probably a very small effect. I don't know much about that story though. What type of emergency pack should we have prepared in case of an earthquake? So I kind of went through some of those. You can buy commercial kits, or you can make your own. Often making your own can be best because you really know what you need. You're not buying things that you may not even use in an emergency. But at earthquakecountry.org/step3, we have lots of guidance about what you can have in terms of your supplies. Question about walkie-talkies. That can be really great for communicating locally along with your family or coworkers. Having some sort of option. Even amateur radio for more long distance communication can be good. So we've gotten so reliant on our cell phones that kind of taken that place of that type of capability. But when the cell phone connection is down, walkie-talkies would still work. A question about what to do in bed. And we did show that, and it may have been before I did, but staying in bed, covering your head with a pillow. Some looks like a comment about earthquake early warning being scary when it goes off. You really want to understand that it can go off and that you want to react right away. You don't want to try to figure out, is this real? Do I really need to do something? You just really won't have time. It really is designed for you to react immediately. Question about at work, do you evacuate because of aftershocks? It really is going to depend on the situation, and how your building is, how new a building is, whether it should be, if it withstood the main shock, it probably will be okay in aftershocks. But if it had any bit of damage, that could be exacerbated by the aftershocks. And so you have to kind of have an understanding with the building manager or others about, you know, what the strength of that building is and what the plan would be. Question about, are there designated evacuation zones where help and communication would be coordinated in the event cell towers are down? There, you know, there are shelter locations that are planned by cities. They're usually not announced in advance because those can change depending on damage situation. So there's not like really set that. I mean, it's an interesting idea where people can go for information, but I'm not aware of that really being set up. And is there such thing as earthquake weather? Basically no. As mentioned earlier, you don't have a lot of weather effects once you go down a few feet, and earthquakes typically start many miles deep. And there's a lot about earthquake weather. You can read about it through the U.S. Geological Survey. Does drilling on fault lines increase or decrease pressure on the fault? A tiny little bit in some places if it's right in the right location, but not enough to really change anything for that earthquake by any means. Is it possible to have an earthquake in Sacramento? Yes, the lower chance than other places in the state. You might feel strong shaking from an earthquake further away. And just to look at the chat, if any other questions there, no, but we're right at our time. And I really appreciate everybody staying through. Again, if you have any other questions, feel free to email info@earthquakecountry.org, and have a great rest of your day.